Welcome back, I'm Kimberly and this is Floral Art Online, the Designs Dissected series, where we use our AI, DesignEye, to analyse and assess competition pieces that I have completed over the years to give us some feedback on how they relate to the principles and elements of design on which we are always judged in competitions, as well as some suggestions for changes that might improve the design in terms of the theme or the category that it has been entered into. So this week we are looking at two designs. One is Petite, so in a very limited size constraints. For this competition it has to be within a 24 centimetre cube, and you can see from the image that it is on a stand that gives us the indication of the size inside which it must fit the design, and it was titled Fragile Beauty. And the other one is a bench design titled From the Fence, and that's a design where only Australian native flora could be used. So both of those designs I was happy with in terms of their presentation. Both of them were awarded prizes. Now, let's first of all look at Fragile Beauty. So as I said, it was a petite design, so fitting into that 24 centimetre cube of space. And what I've done there is used a slice of a tree branch as the base and then added some elements. And to my mind, Fragile Beauty is what you see underwater. It's about coral reefs and just the way that that plant material underwater moves around. And it was at a time where I was particularly fascinated by seaweed and bleaching seaweed. So you'll see that there is some bleached seaweed in that. There's a piece of a sponge, and there's some other berries and plant material that give the indication of an underwater scene that has been captured in this particular design. Now this design plays second, and I was very happy with that because it's a very competitive group that where the competition was, and it's not a size of design that I enjoy doing, I'll have to say. I very rarely do a petite because I just find that it doesn't work for me. I can't think and work in that framework. There are many people who do, and there is an even smaller size in competition called miniature, which has to be under 10 centimetres. And I used to do that in the early days, and now I just don't do it. I just find that the plant material falls apart on me. My fingers are a bit too used to working in a larger framework, shall we say. So there's Fragile Beauty. Let's see what DesignEye has got to say. Looking at Fragile Beauty now through the DesignEye lens, here are the comments that it has made in terms of its analysis of the design. The floral design Fragile Beauty is a captivating arrangement that effectively utilises various elements and principles of design to evoke a sense of delicacy and natural charm. So that's very rewarding that it can see from the image that that's what I was trying to do. Line, the design incorporates both organic and implied lines. The natural curves of the dried plant material create organic lines that guide the eye through the arrangement. The placement of the floral spheres creates implied lines that lead the eye upward, adding a sense of movement and dynamism. So what it's talking about there, the floral spheres are the berries. I can't remember what plant it's from. My mind is saying Basilia, but I'm not sure. So they are berries, they're dried, and that's what it's referring to when it talks about the floral spheres, because obviously it couldn't identify them, which is unusual because often it can identify the plant material that is in our designs. We move now on to form and texture. So form, first of all, the overall form of the design is asymmetrical and organic, mimicking the natural growth of patterns found in nature. The individual forms of the dried plant material, including the sponge-like structure and the spherical floral elements, contribute to a visually interesting and varied composition. So it's good that it picked up that it was sponge. Texture. The design showcases a rich variety of textures. The rough, porous texture of the sponge-like structure contrasts with the smooth, delicate texture of the floral spheres. This juxtaposition of textures adds depth and visual interest to the arrangements. So I guess in terms of the petite design, because we are very much constrained by a cube of space, it's very much easier to get depth into a design because you know exactly what the space is that you need to cover, so that there's always that focus on height, width and depth. Colour. The colour palette is muted and natural, primarily consisting of warm browns and creamy yellows. This limited colour scheme creates a sense of harmony and emphasises the organic nature of the materials used. For space, the arrangement utilises negative space effectively. The open areas around the individual elements allow each piece to breathe and be appreciated on its own, while still contributing to the overall composition. Now, this is the area where I am concerned about this design now that I look at it in hindsight. I think there is too much space around it, and I think that it doesn't fill 2/3 of the available space. So when we look at a competition, we are looking at, if possible, filling 2/3 of the space that's been allocated to us for that particular design. And I don't think this one does. And I would like, now that I look at it, to see it a little bit, almost doubled in size, just to give it a little bit more volume in terms of the space that's allowed. Looking at balance, the design achieves an asymmetrical balance. The taller, more visually dominant element on the right side is counterbalanced by the lower, wider elements on the left. This creates a sense of visual equilibrium and prevents the arrangement from feeling top-heavy. And this is a very important thing to look at when we're looking at our designs, is that we don't have to have them looking like they're evenly placed. They don't have to have symmetrical balance. They can have asymmetrical balance. And the idea is that you, in your mind's eye, you draw a line vertically through the middle of your design, and if you've got an equal amount of material on one side to the other side, regardless of where it's placed, so you can see this one on the right hand side it's at the top and on the left hand side it's on the bottom, then it will be visually balanced. So let's look at proportion. The proportion of the elements in the arrangement are well considered. The taller element is not so overwhelming that it overshadows the smaller elements, and the smaller elements are not so insignificant that they are lost. And I think what has helped me there is that I have massed or grouped the smaller elements together, and so whilst you can see that they are individual elements, there is a sense of solidity around them because they are massed together. Emphasis now. The arrangement does not have a single clearly defined focal point. Instead, the eye is drawn to different elements in turn, creating a sense of exploration and discovery. The light-coloured floral spheres stand out against the darker background, adding a touch of brightness and drawing the eye upward. And unity. The arrangement achieves a sense of unity through the repetition of shapes, colours and textures. The organic forms and natural colour scheme create a cohesive and harmonious composition. Now this is probably an area that the emphasis and the unity are areas where I'm a little bit concerned when I look back on this design. It's very true that there is no single focal point, and you don't have to have a focal point in every design, so long as the design is interesting and your eye keeps moving around it. And this is what the analysis is saying, is that there's enough interest to keep your eye moving around the design. To my mind, though, when I'm looking at this image, I am drawn to the sponge. And great debate later in the floral art world, sponge is not a plant material, it is an animal. And so that in some competitions would mean that I would lose some points or some weighting in the design, because the plant material must always predominate in a design. So I'd have to be careful about, and once again, that might help if I had some more elements at the base of the design, so my eye wasn't being kept drawn to that particular sponge element. And same with the unity. I think that the sponge stands out a bit too much. I don't think it's as unified a design as I would like it to have been. But that's just my hypercritical eye after a couple of years of not having looked at it. So let us have the overall impression. Fragile Beauty is a successful floral design that effectively captures the essence of its title. The delicate materials, organic forms and muted colours all contribute to a sense of fragility and ephemerality. The arrangement is visually interesting and thought-provoking, inviting the viewer to contemplate the beauty and impermanence of nature. And so I'm very happy that an independent analysis was able to see what I was trying to do in interpreting that title. As I've said all along, there are things I would do differently this time around, and that's given me some food for thought. So I would encourage you, even if you've got designs that you were happy with, to submit them through DesignEye. It's a free service that we offer at Floral online, and have a look at what an independent, arbitrary analysis gives you about your design, and see whether, in thinking about those reflections, you might change or adjust or look at doing it differently if you had the opportunity for a second time. Now let's move on to our second design, which is From the Fence. From the Fence was a design staged on the bench, and we had about a 70 centimetre space, which is usual for this particular design, so I could go nice and wide with it, remembering always that the height had to match that width that I was going, but I needed to do a little bit about the depth to make sure that I had the depth as well in the design. So I've used an old fence post from a farm that has been turned into, the top of it's been turned into a vase shape, but the post itself, the fence post itself, still has the holes where the wiring went through for when it was working as a fence post. And into the top of the design I've placed the Banksia branch with the Banksia flowers on it. They don't need water for the duration of this particular competition, so I can have them secured in the top there without needing a water source there. I've put some bark that has fallen off the tree, so it gets a little bit twisted and gives us nice interesting shapes, and I've draped that across where I've joined the Banksia to the top of the fence post. And then throughout the design I've put some insulators from the electric fences, because I have access to them, because my parents are on a farm, and they were lying around the farm, and I said to my dad, I said, I'm just going to take these for a couple of weeks, I'll be back. And he said, yeah, whatever you're using them for, just do it. And so I put them into this design, and my interpretation was that I wanted to express what you might see if you were looking at things that had fallen from the fence or fallen onto the fence. So things that you could gather from the fence, from a fence that had fallen down, for example. And we were constrained in this competition by using Australian native flora, so the Banksias and the bark were fine, as is the fence post, because it's made from a gum tree as well as iron bark. So I knew that I had all of that covered. So let's now see what DesignEye has got to say about this particular design. Oh, I should say that this design also got first place. So looking at the overall, first of all, the floral design From the Fence is a captivating arrangement that incorporates natural and man-made elements to create a visually engaging and thought-provoking piece. If we look at line, the design incorporates both organic and geometric lines. The natural branches and leaves create flowing organic lines, while the straight lines of the fence insulators and the verticality of the wooden post introduce strong geometric lines. This juxtaposition adds visual interest and a sense of dynamic tension. One of the things that it can often be quite difficult to get into a design is that dynamic tension, but it does make a difference in a design when you're looking at it. Shape. The composition features a variety of shapes, including the rectangular fence insulators, the cylindrical wooden post, and the irregular shapes of the leaves and flowers. This diversity creates a visually stimulating and engaging experience. The texture. The design showcases a rich tapestry of textures: the rough bark, the smooth surface of the fence insulators, the delicate petals, and the spiky foliage all contribute to a tactile and sensory experience. For colour, the colour palette is predominantly muted and earthy, with browns and greens being the most prominent hues. This creates a sense of connection to nature. The pops of orange from the Banksia flowers provide a vibrant contrast that draws the eye and adds a touch of warmth. And I will say that that's very true. Now that I look at this design, your eye is immediately drawn to those Banksia flowers because they are just so alive. Low space, the arrangement utilises negative space effectively. The open areas around the individual elements allow each piece to breathe and be appreciated on its own while still contributing to the overall composition. And that's probably my great strength, is that I like to have space, that using that negative space around my designs. I'm not comfortable with the close packed positive space designs. And something else just occurred to me about the Banksia flowers is that sometimes when we're working within a competition and within a certain required plant material element, we don't notice how striking those things can be. Now, on this particular day, not only do all of the floral art competitors have to use native plant material, but it's also the day for the specimen competition for Australian native flora. And so we are surrounded by these colours and these bits of plant material, and we don't see them individually for how spectacular they might be. So it's good to be reminded of it, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. Balance. The design achieves an asymmetrical balance. The heavier visual weight on the right side due to the concentration of elements and the vibrant flowers is counterbalanced by the strong lines and upward movement of the branches on the left. And that's interesting. I guess I hadn't really noticed that. I knew that it was balanced. It looks balanced to me. I do the thing where I draw the imaginary line down the centre, vertically down the centre of it, and it looked like both sides had enough material to make it visually balanced. But when you look at it as a whole, sometimes you can be a bit too critical of your designs while you're preparing them, so it's good to step back and have a second look with a clearer head. And it's something that I often recommend to people, is when they're in a competition and they finish their design, take a photo of it and walk away from it and give yourself 5 minutes to clear your head and not let your brain fill in the gaps of what you want to be seeing. Then look at the photo and see whether it's exactly what you want, and if you've got time, get back and make it the way it should be. So, emphasis. The vibrant orange Banksia flowers serve as the focal point of the design, their bright colour and prominent placement drawing the viewer's attention. The fence insulators also act as secondary focal points, their contrasting texture and geometric shapes creating visual interest. And that's good because there's so many of those insulators in the design. One of my concerns when I put it together was that they would be the thing that drew your eye, and because they're not plant material, that I might have lost points in the judging because of that. But obviously our independent DesignEye is saying that's not the case, and neither did the judge on the day. Contrast. The design utilises contrast effectively to create visual interest. The contrast between organic and geometric shapes, rough and smooth textures, and muted and vibrant colours all contribute to a dynamic and engaging composition. Now, that's interesting that often when we're talking about contrast, we might focus on just one of those things. So we might focus on a contrast in colours or a contrast in textures, and often it's the contrasting textures that we look for when we're doing a design, and that's what we focus on, although we know there's contrast in colours as well. But it's interesting that in this one I got it all right. I did the shapes, the textures and the colours, so that added to it being a design that was worthy of its first place. Unity. Despite the diverse elements, the design maintains a sense of unity through the repetition of colours and textures. The earthy tones and natural textures create a cohesive and harmonious whole. And that again is interesting when you're looking at these two elements, so contrast and unity. You need both, and you need to work out a way that both can be part of the design that you're presenting. So, some suggestions for improvement. So, proportion. The overall proportion of the arrangement could be adjusted slightly. The wooden post could be shortened, or a taller container could be used to create a more balanced and visually pleasing silhouette. And I agree with that. I think that I haven't got the height right, that it's very, very dense in the centre of the space that's being used. And the post is very dominant, and that's always the case. I use it quite often in my designs, and it is always a concern of mine to have it so that it is not the dominant feature of the design. So placement. Experimenting with different placements for the fence insulators could create alternative visual pathways and narratives within the design. For example, clustering them more tightly at the base of the arrangement could create a sense of grounding and stability. That's probably true, but I'd have to do it in terms of thinking about the proportion as well, because once I've got that cluster of bright white shiny element at the base of a design, I'd be concerned about your eye being drawn there rather than to the plant material. So I probably wouldn't experiment with that particular suggestion. I might experiment with having a cluster of them a little bit higher up in the design, or having one more up higher to give me more height along with some higher plant material. Now, another suggestion was about the lighting, and we've seen this in some of the analyses in other videos, and obviously you can't do that when you're at a competition, a physical competition, but if you're doing an online competition and you have the opportunity to experiment with different lighting for the image that you're going to submit, that is something that you need to start practicing doing, because more and more often now there's going to be opportunity for online competition as much as there is for physical competition. So lighting. Experimenting with different lighting techniques could enhance the visual appeal of the design. For example, backlighting or spotlighting could highlight the textures and create dramatic shadows. And that's very true. I think it's very hard with a front-facing image taken with a phone in a competition area that isn't always as well lit as we would like it for floral art, that you don't get the shadow play as much as it could be, and you don't get the highlighting, you don't get the colour, the true colour of the foliage in this particular design. So that is something that, were I submitting something for an online competition, I would definitely look at different ways of lighting a design. So the summary now overall from the fence is a well-executed floral design that skillfully blends natural and man-made elements. By incorporating the suggested improvements, the design could be further elevated, creating an even more captivating and evocative piece. So we thank DesignEye for those comments and those suggestions. As I said earlier, I would encourage you to submit your own designs, images of your own designs, to our DesignEye for analysis. It is an AI analysis, but it is always reviewed by a human before it goes out to you, so that you are encouraged to think that this is real feedback that you're getting, and you can't get this any other way. It's so very difficult at a competition to get feedback from the judges because they're busy, or in some cases they're not allowed, or they're not permitted, or they don't want to give feedback to individual competitors. So I think that this way of learning for us is the best way for us to improve our own skills, our own design styles, so that we know what we can do to continue on our floral art journey. So I hope you have found that useful from me today. For now, I'm Kim Bailey. This is Floral Art Online, the Designs Dissected series.